on Independence Day, you had the Prime Minister giving quite a long speech, the longest, as per his own record, 103 minutes. And in it, he gave a big announcement on GST reforms come Diwali. The big announcement that could impact the Indian economy immensely and will give us a fillip at a point where we're already looking at threats from the United States on tariffs. India is now embracing for a big economic hit with US President Donald Trump slapping 50% tariffs on Indian goods with a warning of more to come if at all the Alaska summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin does not go well. Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, says that he has a plan though to fight back by boosting India's economy from within. And his biggest weapon, of course, the massive reform within GST. The first big change since the GST was brought into place 8 years ago, Prime Minister Modi for the first time has announced reforms. I'm going to take you through what he said exactly. Listen in.
इस दिवाली में आपको एक बहुत बड़ा तोहफा देशवासियों को मिलने वाला है। हम नेक्स्ट जनरेशन जीएसटी रिफॉर्म्स लेकर के आ रहे हैं। ये दिवाली के अंदर आपके लिए तोहफा बन जाएंगे। हमारे एमएसएमईज, हमारे लघु उद्यमी, इनको बहुत बड़ा लाभ मिलेगा। रोजमर्रा की चीजें बहुत सस्ती हो जाएगी और उससे इकोनॉमी को भी एक नया बल मिलने वाला है।
All right, Prime Minister Modi, in his extended speech, went on to speak about MSMEs getting huge relief, daily items to become cheaper. Well, right now, GST has four main slabs. That's 5%, 12%, 18%, and 28%. The government now wants to simplify the GST package to just two slabs. That's 5% and 18%. That only means now almost all goods taxed at 12% will drop to 5%. So cheaper will be essential things like toothpaste, food, medicine, education supplies, etc. And even most items that has a 28% slab currently, like TVs and washing machines, will all drop to 18%. So that's going to be massive across industry verticals. It will be a certain relief. Handful of harmful products like, for example, tobacco will be taxed much higher at maybe 40%, and special rates for gems and jewelry will remain. Modi says that this will put more money in people's pockets, it will boost spending power of Indians and will give a big lift to small and medium businesses, especially important now when the tariffs are squeezing exports. Trump tariffs has threatened India, but not so much that we succumb. Prime Minister Modi there putting into perspective on what can be done to uplift the economy and ensure that we are Atmanirbhar. The reforms are built on three pillars, according to the Prime Minister as he spoke at length. Structural changes to make GST simpler, lower tax rates to increase affordability, and ease of living for citizens and businesses. This is what exactly the GST reforms are aimed at. It's aimed at giving a push to sectors like agriculture, textiles, fertilizers, renewable energy, automobiles, health, and insurance. A high-powered panel, now post his talk at the Red Fort, we hear that a high-powered panel has already consulted with states and the proposal will be going to the GST Council. It's headed by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and sometime around September, October, the new GST will be rolled out, likely around Diwali as per the Prime Minister. Markets are, of course, watching closely. After what Prime Minister said, it's likely that Monday markets will open up in green. It will be certainly a big pre-Diwali boost. Modi says the past decade was about reform, perform, transform, and now India must prepare for the next leap, aiming for a $10 trillion economy by 2047. So clearly here, from what we see, Prime Minister Modi using GST as a weapon to ensure the economy is stabilized ahead of Trump tariff imposition. Modi's salvo on tariff war, is that a welcome move? Joining me right here is Shelby Williams, political strategist for the Republican Party, of course, to speak a little on the Trump tariffs, the impending on India. Ambassador Avina Sikri, former Indian diplomat. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us. We have Adit Kotari, foreign affairs and geopolitical expert, and CA Bimal Jain, GST expert. Before I get to our experts on the foreign diplomacy, I would bring in our GST expert, a quick look at a big relief that Prime Minister Modi may have announced across sectors from 28% to 18%, from 18% to 12%. That's a huge shift. That's going to give us a lot of spending power. I'm already excited to see what's coming as part of that GST reform. Would you want to explain to us a quick brief as to what this really means for the Indian economy as of now?
See, Nabila, the announcement is focusing towards vocal for local, Atmanirbhar Bharat, against the tariff threat. Now, Honorable Prime Minister is focusing on domestic demand and providing boost to the key sectors and key industries. If you look at rate rationalization, which you talked about, we are presently having 5%, 12%, 18%, 28%, and there is compensation cess on certain items applicable. Now, what is being announced today, that there will be only two-tier rate, 5% and 18%, meaning thereby the slab of 12% will go away, 28% slab will not be there. It is going to be applicable only for few products, and compensation cess which is gone will not be there.
Fantastic.
So the impact would be
Did we have to wait for Trump tariff threat for the GST to go down? Because you had the entire country up in arms, upset that we have such heavy GST prices to pay. But well, better late than never.
No, it's a great announcement. Look at Nabila. We were looking for this rate rationalization, this announcement of two-tier rate, 5% and 18% going to boost the economy. Our demand will go up in the market because rate will go down. And it is going to help all common men, Aam Aadmi, society at large, farmers and everyone. If rate is going down, quite obvious demand will go up. And if demand will go up, then this will boost the local domestic economy. And that is what Honorable Prime Minister is targeting about. And this rate rationalization was a long demand. We are into 9th year of GST. This is the one of the thing. And then second important thing, the stability. The rate stability will come into the picture. Today we are having classification dispute. What rate going to be applicable? But once this rate rationalization is being done, for that group of ministers sitting and talking with the state, and this is going to be proposed in September or October, next 56 GST Council meeting. This rate rationalization will add to all our domestic demand. Our key sector will get momentum. They will get incentivization, and thereby the impact of the tariff threat we can reduce to certain extent, and whatever we are finding that going to be negative because of tariff threat will be add up with the domestic demand.
Now, I don't know how much of that, will this really entirely be able to stabilize the economy? Not too sure how bad the Trump tariff impact will be entirely on India. All of that time will tell, but a quick word from Ms. Veena Sikri on Prime Minister Modi using GST as soft economic power to fight the Trump tariff impact impending. What's your view on that? Was this expected? Ma'am, you're on mute. Please unmute.
I think Prime Minister Modi's statement was very clear that his primary objective right now is to protect the interests of the farmers, the fishermen, the entrepreneurs, and the MSMEs. And he said he's going to stand like a wall to ensure that their interests are not affected. So in that sense, he was signaling that on the trade talks with the US, where it's exactly these sectors, dairy and agriculture and so on, which are where it seems that President Trump wants more concessions, where, Prime Minister Modi has drawn the red line that concessions are not going to be possible. Of course, there have been a whole lot of other concessions that Prime Minister Modi has given in terms of purchasing more energy products, in terms of purchasing more soybean and so on, a lot of other aspects that have come in. But I think in terms of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, because this is the big thing that Prime Minister has said, that the answer to this is to make India self-reliant as far as possible. And all these GST concessions are for two purposes. A, for promoting the self-reliance, and B, for making India a more and more attractive destination for foreign direct investment. And I think this ease of doing business, simplifying the whole rigmarole of approvals and, 120 approvals here, this clearance, that clearance, simplifying all of that. Those are some of the very important aspects that he's announced today morning, including the question that by the end of this year, we will already have the first output of our computer chips. So I think this is the semiconductor industry that is going to come up very quickly in India, which is already being planned for some time. So I think that all these aspects put together have signaled a significant step forward for Prime Minister Modi, both for the Indian economy itself, for the Indian citizens themselves. The new bonus on GST will be a big boost, not only for consumption, but for bringing in more and more of the so far what was called the black economy into the white economy. By people will not be so unwilling to pay GST. They will readily come and declare their prospects, and this is very good even for foreign direct investment. So I think all in all, this was a very significant step because
Absolutely.
he did.
And in a way, not a direct retaliation at the United States to also preserve long-term relationship with the US. Since Trump often says India is a friend, Modi is a friend. Well, Modi is responded in measure, very diplomatically, correcting the internal economy and yet maintaining relations without an actual full-blown conflict. Well, that's what India is always known to be, and we've stood up to that, risen to the occasion, even at a time of distress. Shelby Williams, your take on this? We're looking at Trump's doublespeak, if I could say. He's on one hand threatened India with 50% tariffs. On the other, he says, I'm going to be meeting Putin. I want a Nobel Prize for fixing relations between several countries, and he hopes to actually be credited even for Russia, Ukraine. But if it does not go his way, then India faces more tariffs. How fair is that?
Yeah. Well, first, happy Independence Day.
Thank you.
Second, the fact is that Russia is a geopolitical foe of the United States and presents economic and security threats in a number of ways. So the fact that this summit is taking place in Alaska between President Trump and President Putin is very promising. There is no guarantee, like President Trump said, there's no guarantee that it's going to be resolved. President Ronald Reagan famously met with Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik and had everything teed up to resolve the Cold War, and it came that close, but ultimately fell apart. There's a much greater chance of it falling apart here. But when it comes to America's security and economic interests, isolating Russia is important. And that's why, as I had the privilege of discussing on News 9 a week ago, when other countries effectively enable Russia's ongoing war and isolation, that's when President Trump stepped in with India. And I believe that President Trump would much prefer to be a trade partner with India than for India to be a trade partner with Russia. I'm very hopeful that something positive will come out of this summit. I think it's fantastic. I think Prime Minister Modi's response was masterful. And I think it's fantastic for India to shore up its economy irrespective of the United States. And if that tariff gets reduced on India and the GST reforms result in a stronger Indian economy, I think obviously that benefits India and benefits us as well.
Well, I'll also bring in Adit Kothari on this. Adit, as we see India trying to stabilize internally itself, we're also looking at the Modi government now, looking at alternative partnerships, be it the UK free trade agreement with the United Kingdom and the Europe. India is exploring alternate avenues, trying to less depend on the US markets. And let's not forget the move where India's rupee is now all set to challenge the dollar. The last 24 hours have been big, very silent moves by the Indian government, but surely in the right direction, you believe?
No, absolutely in the right direction. I think India does need to reduce its reliance on US as a strategic trade partner and sort of look at more avenues, getting their FTA stitched up with the European Union. To begin with, the FTA with the United Kingdom is already in place, and more such FTAs need to be sort of carved out as a consequence of the multipolar world that we're living in now. But we've got to hand it out to Prime Minister Modi, and this I'm speaking as not as somebody who opines on geopolitics, but somebody who's set up a MSME recently last year in India and I'm manufacturing LED TVs in India, this was something which we couldn't have thought about maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And the reason why we're looking at this now is because Prime Minister Modi has a vision of ensuring that end-to-end manufacturing becomes a reality in India. So at this point, LED TVs, for example, you cannot import a whole TV from any country. Everything has to be either has to be bought into India in a SKD format, which is basically semi-knockdown condition, and then you've got to assemble them. So as a consequence, that gives the manufacturer a chance to understand the manufacturing process and then start reverse engineering and start producing certain elements in India. And that is exactly what we're doing. And now the 28% slab going away, that is definitely going to boost the economy to a different dimension. We're already estimating that Diwali sales are going to be up as a consequence, nearly to about 10 to 15%. Given these new GST reforms, Nabila.
A quick word. I would like to bring in Shelby on this. Shelby, the logic behind actually imposing secondary tariffs on India and other countries, those who are cozying up to Russia, or shall I say, just for internal benefit. India has bought oil from Russia, to which we are being punished, right? But the question here is that if India stops buying oil from Russia, and if other countries like China stops, then you're looking at global oil prices surging. It could very well surpass the $200 per barrel. So your take on that, on how is US going to deal with something like that? Is it a well thought out move by Trump to threaten countries against indulging with Russia?
I think it is for two perspectives. Let's say all countries stop buying oil from Russia and rare earth minerals, et cetera. That's going to cause global prices to increase, but only short term. Russia is not going to have any resolve or any choice but to come to the table. In fact, while both President Putin and President Zelensky have not backed down thus far, both have recently shown signs of being willing to talk. Both need to be able to do that in a way that saves face. But the fact that, again, President Putin is meeting with President Trump at this summit to begin with is very promising that things can start to de-escalate, the war can end. Both Russia and Ukraine are going to have to make concessions for that to happen, because both have just been entrenched for years now. So on the other side of that, let's say it all falls apart. Let's say the summit completely falls apart and oil prices would rise if Russia, I'm sorry?
Right. From the information we have, we understand this would increase inflation in the United States. Your economy could be dented. Is that not a factor you want to consider?
Well, it is, but again, it's short term. And I think President Trump is looking at the long-term ramifications of ending the war in Ukraine, and he's using, under the United States Constitution, foreign affairs is under exclusively the president. The Congress doesn't have a say in that. So the president is using one of the only mechanisms that he has under the U.S. Constitution to deal with foreign affairs in a way that creates ultimately free and fair trade where possible with other nations. And as I've said before, India, and as President Trump has said, India is a friend, and I've said it's an important ally. So I think he's looking at the long-term ramifications, recognizing it'll result in short-term spikes in energy prices as well as inflation for the United States.
Question for you before I go to Veena Sikri. But Aditya, a quick question. What is it?
Sure. I just wanted to point out the hypocrisy of the United States. You're punishing India because you do not have that kind of dependency, the supply chain dependency on India, but you do not have the spine to do the same with China, because you're completely reliant from a supply chain perspective, which is why you're not imposing the 50% tariffs on China, for example. So, that hypocrisy of the United States, that double speak needs to be exposed. It needs to be spoken about. And the fact that, whatever United States is doing with India is going to have some sort of an economic whiplash, even in the United States. Say, for example, you're looking at gear parts or gear belts. India is one of the largest produces and supplies to the United States. So somebody who's got a Ford car, goes in for servicing, his gear parts are going to be now 50% more expensive. So as a consequence, you're hurting, the real segment of American people. So, I don't think it's a very well thought out strategy. I think President Trump is basically trying to show off his bravado, and he's trying to use the Modi government to somewhere arm twist Putin to get him on the table and sort of, come on the negotiation table.
Okay.
Well, that's exactly right. And you're right that there is going to be a backlash or a ramification for America and American consumers. And you're right to point, I don't see it as hypocrisy, but you're right to point out the differences between America's dynamic with China, on whom we are too dependent, and America's dynamic with India, on who India is to a degree dependent on America. And I think that should change. I agree that India should be more self-reliant. I think we should be more self-reliant as well and not depend so much on China. But those are very different dynamics, which have resulted in different responses.
Well, we do know that India is pushing Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is self-reliant India, and we've that push has happened for the last decade, and it seems like the Prime Minister is reiterated on the same lines. Veena Sikri, now India's message, Prime Minister Modi's message, right, on Independence Day has really emboldened our forces, at least perception-wise. We feel a little more confident in facing the impending tariffs that are coming. But your take on Trump and Putin's meet in about 3 hours' time, I suppose, 3 to 4 hours, Trump and Putin are going to be meeting, and that meet, if it goes well, then well, India stays with 50% tariffs. If not, tariffs could only increase.
Well, I think that much more than the factor of double standards that the panelists have spoken about and Mr. Shelby has tried to defend, much more than that is the trust factor. Because I think a relationship between countries are built essentially on the trust factor. And if you have a very strong and good relationship coming along based on mutual trust, based on mutual interest, and suddenly you break that trust, then what do? Repairing the trust is very difficult. And I think the reaction among the Indian people has been exactly that. They've been completely surprised because you know that the people of India have always wanted a very good relationship with America. There's a very strong people-to-people connect, our students, our engineers, our scientists, the H-1B visas, everything. There's a great interest. But when suddenly this kind of a break in the trust factor comes in and you see that India is being thrown under the bus, for whatever reason it may be. It may be that, President Trump is very keen on his deal with China. And actually, he wants to show to China that China is number one for me. And I can put anybody under the bus just to get that good trade deal with China. So China has got a second 90-day pass. And India has got an additional 25% tariff on oil from purchasing from Russia. And possibly an additional more coming up. I mean, how does India come into the bilateral summit between President Putin and President Trump? We are not there, but still, the senior ministers in President Trump's cabinet have said that India will get further tariffs if the talks don't go well. Now, that is something that the people of India just don't understand. Where is this coming from? So I think that whether it put pressure on President Putin and so on, we all hope that the summit will go well. I'm sure there are some plans. President Trump has spoken of high stakes, but he's also spoken of a 25% possibility of failure. That means there's a 75% possibility of success, which is very good. I think that there would be some kind of a deal that President Trump has in mind, and one certainly hopes that that works and that it is followed up very closely.
But Trump has his own set of rules. He says, do it my way.
yes,
or take the highway.
That is fine, but I'm talking about the reaction in India. So I cannot comment on what another president of another country has decided to do, but I'm talking of the reaction in India. And I would like to say that, something similar happened with China, and it's taken decades, more than a decade to get back to the stage where we are, again meeting President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi is meeting President Xi Jinping. It's a very difficult aspect to get over. Why should a businessman once again trust the American market when he's just been hit badly by these tariffs and another problem. He said, no, I better not trust the American market. Let me find my buyers elsewhere. I won't send anything to. And then what about pharma? I mean, why should the pharma market, go to America and then say, look, we better look for other markets. So suddenly we'll get a tariff on pharma. So let's keep that away from America as well. There's so many aspects which come into the individual manufacturer in India who is, after all, trying to make his ends meet, just as everybody else in America, all the businessmen and, the MAGA program is to make both ends meet and to make manufacturing in America greater. So I think the longer term consequences of a break in the trust factor are very serious. I mean, we just cannot understand, for example, why President Trump wants to now have lunch with Asim Munir and then insist that,
No,
there
but
is something else.
this is classic Trump style. He knows what nerve to step on, and that's precisely what he's doing. But India, of course, isn't wobbling. I'd say that we're as stern as can be. And Adit, if you could give us a little sense on India's rupee push. I think India now trying to reduce dependence on the dollar, pushing up international trade all on the rupee. Would you explain to our viewers what this really means in that front? We hear that 30 countries from Russia to Fiji now already using the special rupee accounts for direct trade. So that's roughly about 1.3 lakh crore that's been settled so far, all in rupees. Less dependence on the dollar, as much as Trump wouldn't have wanted it. It seems like India is forging ahead.
So I think even though India may have spelt out, de-dollarization is not something that they are advocating or endorsing. But I think once the ruble-rupee trade sort of kicked in, I think the message was very clear that we are trying to reduce our dependency on dollar trade, and we are trying to push as much as we can to trade in rupee, so that we have more control over our economy, we have more control over our spending, and we have more control over our rates. So that is the basic premise on which the rupee trade is going to be pushed. And the more countries are going to be coming into this foray, I think India is already leveraging its platforms really well, the UPI platforms, where several countries have now started to adopt
foreign trade.
The UPI.
We hear that earlier foreign trade in rupees would take a long time, weeks for it to get converted from US dollars, and then business would begin. But now it's instant, considering that many countries, nearly 30 countries we hear, has accepted the Indian rupee and are now trading, at least with India, in rupee. Yeah? Adit.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's going to be seamless in that sense that, you do not have to wait for days for LC clearances and those kind of things to happen. Traders across the platform, traders across borders will have seamless transactions and the ability to sort of expedite their businesses. That's absolutely correct.
Very much. Bimal, my last question to you. I started with you. I'm ending with you. GST rejig, come Diwali, there's going to be a big gift for India. More spending power for us Indians. We'll have more money in the pocket. Your quick take on what to look out for.
See, the three pillar which is being announced today, structural reform, there would be less dispute on classification and more stability and predictability on rate and policy decision. And most importantly, ease of living. Registration, now it is being stated by Honorable Prime Minister today, is going to be technology driven, seamless, within the time bound. So any startup want to take registration in GST, it would be given within the time bound manner. And even return filing in GST going to be pre-filled return would be available to that taxpayer, trader, so that return can be filed seamlessly. And the refund one, whenever we are exporting, all exporter, that a time-bound refund would be given to them. Even though you are doing inverted duty structure, what is the inverted duty structure? That I'm purchasing raw material at a higher rate, but my outward is at a lower rate, then the accumulation of credit. Government has announced they are going to done away with IDS concept. And now they will minimize this aspect, and wherever required, they will give the refund to the manufacturer, domestic manufacturer, if IDS is coming out. So overall summary from GST perspective would be, it is focusing on vocal for local, self-reliant India and making GST good and simple tax for the domestic trade.
Right.
And once domestic trade is boosting up, a key sector boosting up, the motivation coming in, and the rate rationalization for the common man, when it is going down, quite obvious, my demand will go up, my consumption will go up, and it is going to add my GDP, which we are finding as a countermeasure against a tariff threat which is being given by Donald Trump. But
Okay.
to me looks like these measures are needed to boost our own economy, domestic economy, and then we can counter whatever threat we are getting from outside India.
Okay, well, it took Trump tariffs to finally bring down GST rates. We're very happy with that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate Ms. Veena Sikri, Shelby, Bimal, and Adit for joining us here today to share your